Hi there, how's it going? I'm Christian with Plan Your Federal Retirement, back with another video with our All About FERS series. Today I wanted to talk about when a good age to retire under FERS is. I recently did a video talking about when is a good date to retire, and we talked about some of the different rules, especially when it came to eligibility. Today I wanted to talk about when's a good age to retire. I think the biggest thing we're going to look at is when are we financially ready and able to retire? And probably the most simple way to answer that question is we have to understand what is your after-tax spending look like on a monthly basis today, and with the sources of income that you'll have available to you when you retire, is there enough to replace what you're spending today, right? If our after-tax sources of income is able to replace what we're spending today, then there's a good chance that we're pretty close to being able to retire, right? And that could be various sources between your FERS pension, maybe your FERS supplement, TSP distributions, retirement distributions, and eventually Social Security. So financially, are we ready to retire is one thing. Now, another thing we have to think about is, physically, mentally, emotionally, are we ready to retire? And lots of times I'll ask that question in a client meeting and say, hey, when do you like to retire? And sometimes I'll get the answer. It's like, well, I'm not sure yet. Maybe another 5 years, maybe another 10 years. They're not really sure. And then some clients, it's just right off the bat, today, right? Next week. And so they're really chomping at the bit to be able to retire. And that's fair enough. Maybe they just had enough. They're kind of exhausted, right? So there's subjective reasons to be retiring, again, from an emotional level, mentally, physically, those kinds of things. And you're really going to want to think about how you'll be spending your time when you are retired. We have to be thinking ahead and planning how our time is going to be spent. If we're single or if we're married, right? Planning those trips, planning those hobbies, those things that we want to do so that we're not just sitting around twiddling our thumbs when we go to retire. So one of the things I wanted to start with was related to eligibility and kind of draw out those options under FERS. Under regular FERS, if you retire with your MRA and 30 years of service, or age 60 and 20 years of service, or age 62 and 5 years of credible service, then you're eligible for that FERS pension, right? And there's other options available to you. You could defer your pension, you can postpone your pension. Not going to get into those options today. We're just going to look at those main thresholds. If you happen to be special provisions, then it would be age 50 and 20 years, or any age and 25 years of credible service, right? Special provisions, air traffic controller, law enforcement, fire department, right? You know who you are if you're special provisions. So it's important to know your retirement thresholds as you're planning your age and you're hovering around one of the years of service. Is okay, if I've got 19 years of service and I was planning on going out before age 60, you might want to hang on until you can retire with the full immediate eligibility under FERS, right? So we got to know what our retirement thresholds are. But another important thing we want to think about is what is the actual FERS calculation for calculating what your pension is going to be. So the first thing we want to do is we look at your highest 3 years of earnings multiplied by your years of credible service multiplied by your multiplier. And if you're regular FERS, typically, most of the time it's going to be 1%, but there is an exception if you are age 62 and instead of having 5 years of service, you have 20 years of service. So if you're 62 when you retire and you've got 20 years of service, then you get an extra 10% bump in your multiplier. So your multiplier goes from 1% to 1.1%, which is kind of nice. It's an extra 10% increase there on your pension. So now that we know our formula, I thought it'd be good to run through a quick example. Let's say we have Bob, he's 61, and we've got Sue, and she's 62. And she's got nicer hair than Bob does. So what we're going to look at is say, okay, for Bob, he has a high 3 of 150,000. In this example, let's say Sue has a high 3 of 150,000, so they have the same high 3. Bob has 20 years of service. 20 years. And so what we're going to do is we're going to try to calculate what his pension is going to be. So we take the $150,000 high three, we multiply it by his 20 years of service, and then we multiply it by his multiplier. In this case, it's 1%. And we come up with Bob's annual FERS pension is $45,000 for the year. Well, Sue, on the other hand, was smart because she knew the rule where if you retire at 62 and you've got that 20 years of credible service, her calculation is going to be 150,000 times 20 years times 1.1%. Instead of her annual pension being 45,000, it's an extra 10%. It's an extra $4,500. So it's $49,500, right? An increase there of $4,500, representing that 10% increase there. Gross versus net, of course, we're not talking about taxes or survivor benefits or health insurance, but still to have that extra 10% increase in the pension is really nice. The reason I wanted to explain this in an example is to highlight that rule. So if you're close to that 62 mark and you're close to having at least 20 years of service, that it could be a good benchmark for you to shoot for because it's a great increase to what your pension benefits are going to be. Now, it's not right for everybody. You really have to understand what's going to be right for you and for your family. And again, we have to look at it from a financial perspective. Are we ready to retire? We're going to look at it from the emotional, physical side as well. But then last, we're going to look at it from the eligibility side. And if things check out and you enjoy what you do and you want to keep working, 62 could be a really good age to retire under FERS. I've got lots of clients who choose to retire sooner than 62, and they meet one of these thresholds, so MRA with 30 or age 60 with 20. In that case, they're going to get their first pension, and then they're going to get a FERS supplement as well. The FERS supplement lasts until age 62, and then at 62 it goes away. At 62 is when you're eligible for Social Security. That's why the FERS supplement goes away. So going back to retiring at age 62 with at least 20 years of service, that's another good place to start for picking a good age to retire as well, simply because of that increase that you'll get in that pension, but also because that's the same year that COLAs begin. Cost of living adjustments begin at age 62. So if you retire, let's say at 57, and we're talking regular FERS, not special provisions. You've got different rules there. Regular FERS, you retire at 57. You're not going to actually have any increase on your pension, any cost of living adjustments up until age 62. That's 5 years of not getting any cost of living adjustments. If you retire at 62 or later, well, that's when your cost adjustments are going to start. And so it's going to mean that much more for your pension benefit for future you or future your spouse, right? I'd say the action item for this episode is to develop that retirement income timeline, looking out over the next 10 years, let's say. Where are your sources of income going to come from? Especially if you're within 10 years of retirement, trying to map out between your wages right now versus when you go to retire, what your pension income is going to be, if your spouse is going to continue working or if they're not working, right? We have to map out this FERS supplement. We have to think about when we're going to take our Social Security. We have to kind of think about every single year where our sources of income are going to be to really determine when is the best age to retirement. I just thought it'd be helpful today to go through some of the thought processes I have working with my clients and helping them. If you have questions related to this, we now have an option where you can give us a call and leave a voicemail with your question. We'll leave that number displayed here on this video. Give us a call, leave your question, and we'll be able to possibly feature it in another video. Make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel so you get our latest videos and content that we put out. And of course, until next time, happy planning.